Three, two, from high atop the world headquarters of Southeastern Fly, this is the Southeastern Fly podcast. Thanks for joining us on this episode. Feel free to share it with your friends and your fishing partners. So, who are our guests today on this episode of It's a Wisdom from the Guides episode? Our first guest is Young Guide. He fishes and guides the waters of Western North Carolina, kind of Carolina. That's a new word. Let me start that over, guys. Who's our first guest today? He's a young guide. He fishes and guides Western North Carolina. He's an owner at Ashe Anglers. Please welcome Nathan Faggard. Nathan, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks, David. We're excited to be here.
Good deal. Our second guest is another young guide. He fishes and guides Western North Carolina as well. He's also an owner of Ashe Anglers. Please welcome Blayney Del Priore. I knew I'd say that.
Priore, you got it.
Priore. Let me start that one over. Please welcome Blayney Del Priore. Blayney, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for having us, Dave. Excited to be here.
I've managed to butcher a whole bunch in that little segment there. Hopefully we can edit some of that out. So I gotta ask this question before I have to ask this question before we even start. How did you two end up starting a business together, a guiding business together?
I can spearhead that one, I guess. I think it just kind of actually, I remember the day we decided to kind of go down this road. We were both originally from out of state and just met through mutual friends and became just good fishing buddies, and we're fishing a couple times a week. And we were in a fly shop in Boone one day and just chatting with the guy working the desk at the fly shop, and he told us that the process to become a guide in North Carolina starts with you just have to buy a $15 guide license, and then
wow,
you're good to go. So it's a pretty low barrier to entry. So on our way to go fishing that day, we were kind of like, let's give this a try.
Little did you know. Blayney?
Little did we know.
Blayney, what's your side of the story? His sounds all like it's all roses.
Yeah, certainly a lot of roses. Exactly what it sounds like. Yeah, me and Nathan, we just started, fishing a lot together. And over the past couple of years, I've been fishing with a bunch of buddies and traveling and whatnot. And I kind of discovered, I really like putting people on fish, and watching other people catch fish brings me a lot of joy. And I figured, you know what? Nathan brought that up. It was kind of perfect timing. I was like, why not us? Why don't we start this and see where we can take this thing? And it's been a lot of fun. It's been a good journey so far, and learned a lot and continue to learn more. So yeah, we're just running with it and having a great time.
Already making more money than you could spend.
Lamborghini's coming in any day now.
Yeah. You keep on dreaming that. So there is money to be made, but you have to really love what you're doing. And I can see where you would have a lot of fun fishing and guiding over in Western North Carolina, because I've been there before. It's kind of becoming a fly fishing destination, maybe more so for people in the border states around it. But also I think some folks, maybe they travel for whatever reason. We went over to an outing with Calvary Outfitters, which was a local group here in Murfreesboro, over to Western North Carolina. I guess there's probably 10 or 11 of us, something like that. Quite a group. We just spread out. We had so much fun. We fished all kinds of different waters. We had folks that wanted to go to tailwaters. We had folks that wanted to go to, I don't know, up in the Smokies. We went to Cherokee one day and caught a whole bunch of leaves. It was in the fall, and that's a story for another time. But there's, variety of fish, variety of elevations, stock trout, natives, smallies, muskie. There's all kinds of stuff over there. But when we went, I really enjoyed. We fished a few days. I really enjoyed going from like Cherokee. Then we went over in and fished one of the tailwaters. I can't remember which one it was. And then we came back, and where else did we fish? We ended up the last day fishing right before we went home in a place called Mill Creek, Mills something, Mills, what is that? What is the name of that river?
North Fork of the Mills. I know that's pretty
North
popular.
Mills. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we did that because it was time to go home. And we were like, let's go fish just for a little bit longer. So we all drove over there, jumped out of the trucks, got the rods out, caught some at the time. I caught some brook trout there. I think that place is stocked. In the part that we fished, it is anyway. And then we jumped back in the truck and drove back to Murfreesboro, and that was the end of it. But so how did you get started fly fishing? So let's back up even further than wherever you decided to get crazy and start a guide service. Um, Blayney, how did you get started fly fishing?
Yeah, so I learned how to fly fish from my aunt and uncle back when I was maybe 12 or 13. Quickly fell in love with it then, but as you know, life has it, kind of didn't really pick up a rod through high school. Um, Went off into college, and then I reunited with a bunch of buddies who also were fly fishing, and I kind of, reignited my spark to get back into it. And I went to college on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, so not a whole lot of fly fishing, but a lot of my buddies were from, Pennsylvania or New Jersey. So we'd often take trips up into Pennsylvania, and also into Western Maryland and up north by Baltimore as well.
Mm.
Do some fishing there, and kind of got bit by the bug again. And post grad right after college, that became my main hobby of choice. And as I had more free time on the weekends, I was hitting the river more and more, and then really falling in love with it. And then of course COVID came. I was like, I need something to do inside, so I started fly tying, and from there, that kind of kept the spark going. I was tying new flies, really wanted to try them out, and then that kind of snowballed into it becoming most of what I do, and keep on falling more in love with it now.
Good for you. So you're from up north, but you ended up down here. We won't
I
hold that
did,
against you.
yeah.
Well, good, good. I actually, it's good to see some maybe of the younger folks getting into it and maybe trying to go on with the guide services and start that kind of thing. But it's also a learning thing as you go along. So, Nathan, how did you get started?
I'm originally from out west. I grew up in Idaho and have been kind of fishing in all sorts since I can remember. Basically, I've had a rod in my hand, just run around on the creeks and rivers and stuff that I grew up around in Idaho, and moved to North Carolina after college. And I didn't even know that there was like an opportunity to trout fish out here.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but quickly found I originally moved to Charlotte, and as soon as I found out I could go catch trout up in the mountains here, my girlfriend and I were just driving up here every single weekend to go chase trout in the streams and stuff, and that led to us eventually moving up here, and continuing to hunt trout down. So
There you
yeah,
go.
but fly fishing and has always been a big part of my life.
So where are you from in Idaho?
I grew up in it's a small town like right up on the Canadian border, called Sandpoint, Idaho. It's north of
Oh,
Coeur d'Alene is the next biggest town
oh,
by
is it
us.
okay?
Hmm.
Got a friend
But
that moved out there.
yeah, yeah, it's a gorgeous part of the world, really. But and there's great fishing opportunities there as well.
Nice.
But I still, even though coming from out west, I still think North Carolina really has a lot to offer as a destination.
Oh, I 100% agree. I really
Hmm.
enjoy it over there. Just there's a variety of waters to fish. Like I said, there's some stock trout. Now we're going to talk about them in a minute, but the wild trout, those are kind of the jewels of the Appalachians. Uh,
Absolutely.
they're small to me, and I've always said this: their head is too big for their body, their mouth is too big for their body. That's maybe the way they're designed, but some of that is because of the food. It's actually the scenery over there is really something. It's a little different than it is on the western side of the Smokies and the western side of Appalachia, but it's still very nice. And there's a lot of good views over there, a lot of cool places to kind of explore and get your feet wet, so to speak, and take in the scenery and just. I mean, the elevations over there are a little bit higher in some places, which is pretty cool. But what are some of the considerations and keys to being a successful wild trout angler in Western North Carolina?
I would say you gotta find the fish first of all, because they're not everywhere. But once you start figuring out where to look, you'll you'll get into them. I think a lot of people too focus on the brook trout opportunities that we have up here, which are obviously amazing that we have that little native beautiful fish in the creeks. But in terms of wild fish too, I think that a lot of people don't realize that there's naturally reproducing brown trout in pretty much all the river systems up here that actually get pretty large too. And that's something that coming from out west where on the average we have probably a bigger fish. I was shocked to realize like the caliber of wild fish that lives up in North Carolina. Um, so yeah, I'd say just start walking up those blue lines and you'll start finding the holes for sure. That's where they're at.
Yeah, and
Definitely.
to add to that, coming from Maryland, not every blue line is going to hold trout or even panfish. So, moving down here was definitely pleasantly surprised that some of the small creeks that you drive over, maybe some of the creeks that are even closer or in town, it's really worth it just to kind of go there, throw some flies, see what happens. Like Nate said, you will be surprised. There's some bigger fish in there, some wild fish where you don't think they would be. So it's really cool to see that.
What do y'all think about the food sources up that high? What are y'all seeing for food up there? I know there's bugs and all that, but what kind of hatches and stuff do you see up in the blue lines the most?
I'd say mostly mayfly hatches, some stoneflies, but mostly mayflies. We run into some caddisflies, but I'd say the majority is definitely mayflies.
And what about so bigger trout, bigger fish, or fish get bigger whenever they can eat crustaceans, stuff like that, stuff with bones, smaller fish, crayfish, stuff like that, stuff with calcium and that sort of thing. Is there a healthy population up there of that, or is it just mostly bugs?
I think the bigger, as soon as a fish gets to be like probably 9 to 12 inches long, they're starting to look for little bait fish a lot more.
Hmm.
And I've never, growing up out west or anywhere else that I've ever fished, I've never seen like true schools of like little bait ball fish that all the creeks up here have. Like there's the little creek chubs when they're like 1 to 3 inches. And then there's all sorts of really pretty like dace and darter species that I've never seen before coming to North Carolina that they're all perfect bait fish size. None of them are really spiny either. They all look like they'd go down real easy if you were trying to slurp one up. So uh,
Exactly.
yeah, I think as soon as a fish gets the opportunity to be bigger than its neighbor, it's starting to look at it as maybe a food option. But yeah, we have really healthy bait populations, and I think especially once it starts warming up, you start seeing them all over the place. And I think that's where a lot of the protein source is for a lot of the fish up here.
Yeah, and I feel like it's easy to kind of get a sense of that as well. And some of the creeks you're walking around here, you'll be, walking up the stream and you'll be spooking a lot of bait fish, and that'll kind of give you a little hint that, what, maybe it's time to put the streamer on. But
Yeah,
yeah, I'd say yeah, you definitely see a lot of, darters and whatnot. And you can definitely get a sense on if the stream is more bug life or more, bait fish life, and it's pretty evident.
Yeah. So what are y'all using for rod sizes and that sort of thing up in the higher elevations?
In higher elevations in those smaller streams, often you'll have streams that are kind of, smothered in rhododendron and lots of other bushes. For the really small streams, we're going to find, smaller wild bows and, wild browns and native brook trout. I tend to, go for the smaller rod, the 7 foot 3 weight. Um, my favorite type of rod to use is a 7 foot 5 weight fiberglass rod. I like that a little
Mm,
better because it gives you a little bit of flex for something like a bow and arrow cast, and it also makes those smaller wild fish feel a whole lot bigger. So it's definitely a
absolutely.
fun fight with those. But yeah, on those small creeks, you can get away with a 9 foot 5 weight, but you might have to choke up on it and get a little creative. But I definitely go for the smaller rods when you're in those higher elevation, smaller streams.
Yeah. Nate, how about you?
yeah, I would say the two rods I fish the most up here would be I have a little 7.5 foot 2 weight that's kind of perfect for what the streams Blaney's talking about, the really tight quarters and more I guess like combat casting around logs and
Right.
trees and stuff like that. I love using that for the small streams, and then I just use a 9 foot 6 weight is sort of my daily driver, so to speak. If I'm going anywhere, it's a little bigger. I love throwing streamers, so that's seems to be like a perfect size rod for the size of fish I'm probably going to run into, and um, it's a little stiffer than a 5 weight, but I could still throw a dry fly on it if I want to, or a nymph rig. But I'm throwing smaller streamers for the most part, so that's a great option to just handle a little bit heavier flies and still have enough power to pull a fish out of the roots and stuff.
Now, are y'all fishing inside the park, or are you able to fish for these types of fish in these types of waters outside the park?
We're quite a ways away from the park, so we fish pretty much exclusively outside the park. We're a
Okay.
good 3 hours from the park. So um yeah, we're all just public kind of trout water all around. We fish the edge of the Pisgah National Forest a lot. And then just, a variety of public trout streams that are in Ashe County.
So what town are y'all in?
West Jefferson,
Um,
Carolina is the closest. It's like kind of the town we're based out of, which is, if you don't know where that's at, it's like northwestern North Carolina. We're right up in the North Carolina, Virginia, and Tennessee meet.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
not too far from Boone, where App State is. That's
Yeah.
sort of the more well-known regional hub.
Yeah. I spent a day in Boone. It was actually very nice over there, although it was snowing like crazy. It was
Yeah,
60 degrees when I left home. So
that'll happen.
yeah,
That'll
that's
definitely
Boone.
happen.
Definitely. So what about gear? So a lot of the folks measure off of the Smokies, but y'all are a little bit further up north. So what about gear and that sort of thing? Boots. I know everybody's kind of got their own uh, thoughts on boots and soles and stuff like that. What are y'all doing for that?
I'm just using, normal wading boots, just, rubber sole. Usually try to go for something like a Vibram sole that's, a little tougher, a little durable. Also, you don't mind hiking in it because you might be moving around a lot. But also grips a lot of those, really slippery rocks and moss quite nicely there. Me and Nate, I think Nate would agree with this. We try to wet wade as much as we can, because it's kind of a little joy to do in the summer, just throwing a
Oh
light
yeah.
pair of pants and I'm a big fan of neoprene booties, just to give you a little more, cushion and warmth in those colder streams. But it's the great thing about West North Carolina is that it really is a four seasons fishery. So I don't really take any time off fishing. I catch fish in January. My really only threshold is once your guides start freezing up and it gets below freezing, that's where, kind of takes a little bit of the fun away. But yeah, just waders and boots pretty much for the latter half of the year. And then once around this time, around April or around May, and definitely during the summer, really throwing on the booties and getting some wet wading in.
Nice. Yeah. I love wet wading in the higher elevations. So let's move on down. Would you come down further to get into the stock waters, down further in elevation? Would you come down further to hit the stocked waters in North Carolina?
We do some. So there's sort of like two elevation thresholds that people in this area will talk about. They talk about being you're either on the mountain or down the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And all if you're ever driving up here from Charlotte or like Winston-Salem or anything, there's like a real obvious point where you just start driving uphill for like 15 or 20 miles, and then once you get to the top of that, you're like on the mountain, so to speak.
Right.
Um, so they stock sort of they stock a lot of the streams that are what we would call on the mountain, which are we're right on the eastern continental divide. So we're right around 3,000. Our peaks are probably closer to 4,000. But a lot of our like more valley streams are around 3,000 feet, and then they'll stock sort of everywhere on the eastern side of the divide that drains down the mountain. So those streams stay pretty cold uh, into the summer as well. And they'll stock those. So we do drive down there some. We generally don't have to find stocked fish because there's plenty closer by. And the ones down the mountain that goes down to 800 to 1,000 feet of elevation. So those ones also aren't. They're a pretty short window on them. I'd say
Right.
they're much past June. It's getting way too hot for them. Whereas ours, we have holdover fish here that'll make it all the way through the summer
Oh,
for
okay.
starters. So, um, yeah, so we'll drive down there some. If we like to follow that stocking truck around sometimes, and find the real dumb ones.
Right.
Uh, but for the most part, I'd say we stay up in the upper elevations, and most of our rivers too. When they're stocking, you're catching a lot of stalkers, but you're going to catch a mix of wild fish in there too, which makes them kind of special in that
That's
sense.
interesting.
Mhm.
So how can you tell the difference? I know that's going to be a question that I will get later on. Well, why didn't you ask how you can tell the difference? So I'm going to go ahead and ask, how do you tell the difference when they're both in there?
So the stockfish are pretty, for the most part. I mean, North Carolina does a pretty good job, I think, with their hatcheries. They produce some good looking fish, but the obvious giveaway that most of them will have is their fins are like worn down a little bit
Yeah.
on the stalkers, and I think that's just from growing up in a concrete tank. If they're just swimming in a circle, their fins get worn down.
Right.
Uh, so that's the obvious one, and the wild fish just look really clean. They're like their fins are perfect, crisp, and they behave a little bit differently too. So sometimes like the type of water that you catch them in will be indicative of if you're fishing for a stock trout, because the stock trout, they don't go too far from where they dump them in for the most part, and they kind of act as if they like the hole they get dumped in is their tank. Like you'll see them just swimming
Right.
in a circle, like not holding in the current, just swimming in a circle for no reason around the edge of the pool. Whereas the wild trout, they're going to be up in that root ball under the cut bank, like where
Right.
trout naturally would live.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, and adding to that, I feel like something I've noticed is some of the brown trout that the state stocks, and I'm sure it's hatchery to hatchery dependent, but a lot of them just really have darker brown spots. You don't see a lot of red. Whereas the wild fish, they'll have colored up, red adipose fins. They'll have sometimes red streaks, and the tail is almost like it's dripping red, and they'll have really vibrant red spots on them. So I think it's easier to definitely to tell, if the browns are stocked versus holdovers versus wild as well.
So are y'all using anything different for the as far as flies go for the stock trout versus the wild trout?
It's most of the same. I think some of the stock trout will be more eager to go after, a flashier fly, maybe something, like a red copper john or a red zebra midge, something like that, where it's just enough to get their attention, looks, bug life enough. I think some of the wild fish, and you'll see it when you hook a wild fish, it usually won't give you a second try. Some of these stock trout, if you have a fish, hit the same fly in the same spot 3 times, 4 times in a row, you're like, okay, I think I know that one. That one came from the truck.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
some of the wild fish definitely prefer more of a natural looking fly, and as opposed to the kind of, I guess you can call them junk flies that you might throw at a stock trout.
We were fishing. I was fishing a guy yesterday and he was setting pretty good, setting the hook pretty good. We fish from a boat here. That's kind of my MO. And so I can see down in the water. And I saw him he was on a nymph. I saw him get to eat and he came up. I didn't see anything flash or anything like that. So I said, dump it right back in there. He's looking for it. Obviously it's a stock trout. Whenever we got it in, it was a little bit better trout, but it was still stock, which fine is I, I don't care one way or the other as long as folks are enjoying themselves and they know what they're getting into whenever they get on the boat. But we're really looking for the holdovers. But nonetheless, I said throw it right back in there. He's probably looking for it, and he hit it again. He missed it again. I said, all right, get it right back in. Well, so he tossed it right back in, and yeah, he missed it twice. Caught it the third time. Had to have been the same fish. It ate the same. It looked the same as the indicator hitting. I didn't see any other fish around, so I'm pretty sure it was him or her or whatever it was. But yeah, and I've had wild fish do that too. You'll have wild fish come up from time to time, and especially on dries, you'll see them come up and poke it, and you'll set pull the trigger too quick, get it right back in there. They'll come right back to it. It's not like they're. I think they have more I don't know that they're any smarter. I think they're just a little more in tune with what's going on, and because that's where they've grown up. And I think that also those stock trout can over time, if they're lasting 2 or 3 or 4 years, they for the most part are going to be acting like wild trout because they've been there long enough that they know that, all right, I know this next thing coming by is my meal for today. I know I'm not going to see it again, and I know that I'm going to be looking for it for whatever comes next. So, what about dries for the stock trout? Are y'all fishing any dry flies for stock trout? That seems to be a thing that's coming up in my messages and stuff lately.
Yeah, I'll fish like I fish a lot of foam flies for them. Mostly just because I love a dry dropper rig. Whatever I'm fishing, I just love fishing two flies.
Right?
Um, but I recently I've been fishing just like a really small chubby Chernobyl, like a size 14 or even a size 16,
Mm,
to try and match. We've got recently I've been seeing these little golden stones coming off that are kind of in that size range, along with some bigger kind of tan to yellow mayflies. Um, so I've been fishing, and I've had a few come up and eat the chubby. So I love doing that with like Blaine was saying, like a copper john underneath. It's a deadly rig for the stock trout and wild fish for that matter too. Um, but yeah, there's always the old pellet fly too
well,
for the
true. Yeah.
stalkers that people.
I used
Uh,
I used to
I
have
know.
one of those.
Yeah, I don't have yet to actually throw one at a stock trout, but I've seen them rise at like throwing gravel in the water before, so
I have
it
I
probably
have
works
fished one for I fished one for half a day and didn't even get a look and threw a parachute Adams on and bang
immediately.
immediately.
Yeah,
So, like I said, I had one of those once, but I didn't see it working real well, so I
well,
don't
that's
fish
good
it
to know.
anymore.
I don't plan to tie one on, but
Is
I know I
that
know
where you
it's
draw the line? Are you drawing the line
yeah,
like I am
yeah.
not
I got
tying one
some
of those
standards.
on? Yeah. So when y'all are fishing your dry droppers, and Blaney, I assume, do you fish a dry dropper too, or you just straight up dries?
Yeah, I fish a dry dropper. I'm kind of a nerd for nymphs. I can't lie. That's one of my favorite things to fish. It's something I love to tie. So I love to tie a really heavy nymph with big tungsten bead on it. Couple wraps of lead in that fly as well. Get it down deep. And that's something I feel like it's been working a lot because a lot of these Appalachian streams still have big plunge pools where it goes 4 maybe even 6 feet deep, and then within a 3 to 5 foot range. So you got to get that fly down deep quick. So I think that's something that definitely works. But yeah, usually if it's a dry dropper, I try to make the dropper length about you know um, the depth and a half of what the river is or what the stream is, just so you account for the angle of how your dry is holding the nymph up in the water.
Yeah. How about your leaders from the fly line to the fly? About how long leader and tippet? How long is that
Um,
usually?
It depends on the dry. If I'm fishing a bigger, like Nate was saying, a bigger kind of foam fly, I'll usually do a stiffer, maybe a shorter leader, sometimes even 6, 7 feet, depending on how wide the river is, just to turn over those flies a little bit easier.
Hmm.
But for some of the pickier fish, if you're on a wider piece of water, you can go, 9 feet long to your point fly or to your dry fly. But anything longer than that, you're kind of just getting your nymph and your dry tangled together, and that's one of the worst, rat's nest or bird's nest to untangle. So try to get away with what you can get away with.
So are y'all laying much fly line on the water? Or are you trying to keep it all off and just off the water and fishing those short distances?
Something that we've been trying to do is, especially on I guess the shorter streams or the more narrow streams is maybe a little bit of fly line, but as soon as you can, throw a upstream mend in it, and then once your nymph is kind of in the strike zone, what I try to do is lift up almost all the fly line and all the leader up, so I'm just really connected to the dry fly, and that'll slow your drip down. It'll keep you from getting other currents kind of putting a belly in your fly line and kind of gets you just straight. That way you're kind of almost tight line in the dry, and then you're right on a fish if it takes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a technique that when I first started fishing in the Smokies, uh, we fished the Tennessee side, of course, and over time, I got to where I could keep the fly line. I could keep everything off the water. And if I was going to fish dries, I would never tie a dropper on because I just wanted to fish dries. That was just kind of the thing that at the time I wanted to do. But I could stand that fly up on the hackle and the tail for long distances. Now I can't do it because I don't do it all the time like I did. I'm not fishing over there. It's been a while since I've been over there, but I could do that, and you don't really have to do anything else but just pay attention to that, and just make sure you're hitting the flow just right and getting a good float and stand it up there and keep everything off. And that to me was the most productive way, but it took me a while to figure out how to do it and how to get that timing just right and all that balance that was in there. Now, those skills are so, I'd have to really dust them off to be able to do that. But doing that, I think, is really what changed it for me. It kind of made it a game for me too. So, yeah, I enjoyed doing that sort of thing. So, how far are y'all from the parkway over there?
From the Blue Ridge Parkway.
Where I'm
Yeah.
at, I can pretty much like 15 minutes away.
Okay. All right. And from there, so let's just, yeah, the Blue Ridge Parkway. Sorry, Nate, I didn't mean to cut you off there. So the Blue Ridge Parkway, is everything below it that y'all are fishing, or is it kind of on the upper and lower sides of it?
So the Parkway runs like right kind of along the divide for the most part. It kind of weaves back and
Uh-huh.
forth across it. Most of what I would say the majority of what we fish is on the western side of the Parkway. So like the western.
Okay.
Um, and then we'll hop on both sides of it. A lot of those great little like Blue Line and Brookie streams kind of like are just right along the Parkway all throughout this area. Um, but yeah, for the most part, I would say we're fishing still what we would call on the mountain, still the higher elevation stuff, but um on the western slope still.
Okay. All right.
Mhm.
Now I've been on that parkway. We were on it for, I guess, for a whole day, just riding and stopping and looking, and the whole time I was like, wow, that looks like that looks like it could be great. That, and so does that, and so does that, and so does that. And then we got off of it a couple of times and back on it, and all I could do was think, why do I not have a rod rigged up? I didn't even have
Rule
one
number
with
one,
me.
you never leave the house without it.
Dang right. Yeah, exactly. Um, so is your gear kind of the same for these stock trout, or is it different?
I'm normally throwing the 6 weight for stocked fish, just because they stock some pretty party sized trout when they're stocking. Most I'd say the average are probably like 12 to 15-inch range.
Right.
Um, but they definitely throw. I don't know if it's like older brood stock that they're getting rid of, or what it is, or if they're just growing like a couple trophy trout to throw in every section.
Right.
Uh, but they definitely throw some ones that are big enough that I'm not trying to hook them on a 2 weight. I want a decent one.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. So we've been through stock trout, wild trout. You've got another species over there that you can chase, and this one's pretty interesting to me. Because I haven't done it over there. We didn't do it when we went over there with Calvary Outfitters. Nobody fished for smallmouth, but I knew they were there, and I was always thinking, man, I would love to get on a boat and do it that way. But I don't know. Do y'all do it from a boat? How do y'all do the smallmouth thing over there?
Yeah, we do it both. So we do have a boat that we'll go float the bigger rivers for smallmouth, and that's absolutely my favorite way of going after them. And like I said, I love fishing streamers, so those are streamer eater fish, and you can just sit on the front of the boat and catch them all day long. It's a hoot. But they're also the main river that we're fishing up here is the New River for smallmouth. And it's kind of a big slower, but there are some riffly sections of it. But for the most part, it's kind of a bigger, slower river, I would say. And it's most of the access to it is going to be like knee deep wading, so it's real easy to wade too.
Oh, nice.
You can just kind of walk down the bank and hit it with poppers or cast little streamers, or we do nymph form a little bit as well. But if anything's willing to eat a streamer, and I have the option of fishing a nymph or a streamer, I'm throwing the streamer every single time. So I don't spend too much time nymphing for them. But yeah, it's a really great fishery that we have here, especially during the warmer months when we kind of start trying to leave the trout alone in July and August when the water just gets a little too hot for it to be um, ethical catch and release fishing, I would say. But that's prime time for the smallmouth. So they're happy in the warm water, and they'll keep your rod bent all day long and keep us happy all day long. So it's a great fishery that we have.
Um, so is there ever a time where you could like take a client and say, let's fish smallmouth today and stock trout the next day and wild trout the next day? Is there ever a time like that? And if there is, what time of year would that be?
I would say it's right now. Filming this in the very end of April. I would say April, May, June. Those are all great. I mean, great fishing months for everything. Basically, they're
Yeah.
still running their stocking program into June, so you're still and the water's still plenty cold for the wild fish and for trout in general. And there's even stretches that will float or go wade where all fish are on the table. You catch a wild brown, you catch a big stalker or a bass all out of
Wow.
the same hole.
Okay. Nice. So you could do a smorgasbord or a buffet
You
of,
really could.
yeah, that'd be
Absolutely.
that'd be
Yeah.
pretty cool.
The
That'd
whole
be a
short
good way
food.
to, yeah, if we could get away from the family long enough, you could get that done, or just plan your own trip over there. What types of streamers, Nate, are you mostly throwing over there for smallmouth?
I love just I mean, I tie most of my own streamers and I love flies that I can lose a lot of and not feel bad about having just spent hours tying them.
Right.
Most of what I tie and fish is just like really simple patterns. I love fishing just, an olive woolly bugger is something I will never like leave my house without. There's one in every single box I have. Little clouser minnows, chartreuse and white clousers work great. Little crayfish imitations. We're kind of popping along the bottom. That's a prime smallmouth, uh, bait of choice. And I throw some bigger streamers too, like a dungeon every once in a while, if I'm really looking for a big fish. But for the most part, clouds or minnow, little woolly buggers, all it's going to take, and you're going to have plenty of action on that. So, and you can tie, 50 of them in a sitting and
Right.
lose as many as you want. It's not the end of the world.
There's a lot to be said for being able to lose a fly and not think too much about it.
Yeah.
Blayney, how about you? What are your considerations and keys to being successful for the smallmouth over there?
One thing I like to pay attention to is, if you're fishing throughout the day and maybe you don't get a lot of streamer bites, um, I try to look, once that sun starts going down, really 4 p.m. on, don't be afraid to tie on, a popper, whether it's something a little more subtle, like a, sneaky Pete that might dive under the water a little bit. Or, my personal favorite is fishing, a big frog just right from the bank back to the boat, or in the slower water, they call it frog water for a reason, the slower water, if you're just waiting, and that's it can pull them up. I mean, me and Nate saw that on a couple of trips last year, or last end of last summer, where a streamer was doing well, but then you throw on a popper, and that's my favorite type to eat is watching a bass come and attack it, or some of the bigger ones. Honestly, they just kind of slurp it from the surface, so it's cool to watch too. But that's definitely one of my favorite types of fishing to do for smallmouth.
I've got a whole bunch of green poppers that I keep in the boat just for that right there. I think
Yep.
I think I've been catching. I say I'm the one catching them. I'm not. Clients are catching more nymphing, big stuff under indicators. Now, somebody that's really got a hot hand and all that, they just want to throw streamers that have been doing it for a while and they're dialed in and all that. That's a different story. But just day in, day out, intermediate type anglers and newer anglers, we're just putting queelies, woolly buggers, stuff like that. A couple of the little flies that I've got made up underneath a bobber sometimes, and sometimes they're just out there dead drifting it off the end of the fly line. But it's just, day in, day out, it seems like the nymphs are really producing more. And most of the time, believe it or not, bigger fish, which is why I'm so interested in crawfish, crayfish, that sort of thing. because that's what most of that is imitating. Plus the style of fishing, you can pop them and jump them and slide them over rocks and stuff like that. So, are y'all doing any of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I like to tie a lot of smaller crayfish patterns on more of like a jig style hook
Yeah,
with either a tungsten cone head or a tungsten bead, something where it looks like a crayfish where the head is down and the legs are kind of dangling up. With that jig hook, you also get you don't get caught in the rocks as much, and it really gives that popping motion and looks like the real deal. So and that works a lot for wild trout. In more of the dog days of summer as well, because that's a bigger meal for them, and that's really when we see a lot of this crayfish popping out. But yeah, you put some orange pine squirrel on a fly, and put little two tag ends off of that, and it certainly works very well.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and they'll also, I mean, it's hard to believe, but the smallmouth will just hit a dry fly too. A lot of people overlook that opportunity a lot of times, but it works. Uh, Day in, day out, it'll work a little better than a lot of folks think it will. Um, Anything as far as gear goes, uh, Blayney, that you can think of that somebody might want to bring with them over there?
Yeah, so I primarily fish for smallmouth with my 6 weight. I don't think it would be, I think it'd be a good idea, just if you want to level up a little bit, if you're casting from the boat all day, a 7 weight, maybe even the 8 weight, could be more applicable depending on what you're throwing. Definitely save your shoulder a little more trouble. But I like my 6 weight because you can kind of get away with a jack of all trades style rod where you can, throw a smaller streamer with accuracy. You can even, throw dries, poppers and hoppers as well with a 6 weight. But definitely don't be afraid if you have an 8 weight, if you have a 7 weight, to take that out as well. It's definitely gonna, give you a little more backbone. And as we know, those smallmouth fight hard. So
Yeah.
you definitely, could still get a good bend in that 8 weight or 7 weight.
What's kind of the average size smallmouth in the rivers? I guess maybe we need to take it a couple different ways. You were talking about the new river that you're floating in a boat, and then you're doing some wading up there. I assume that's not in the new river. So let's break that up. What's the average size fish when you're floating in the new river type of water?
For smallmouth, I mean, we've got a lot of, I would say, on the smaller end of fish. Like really, I honestly think that the river as it sits right now is probably overpopulated with smallmouth because our average fish is smaller than it could be. I would say we've got a lot of fish between like 6 and 10 inches that you'll
Yeah.
catch on a day of floating. Not to say there aren't bigger ones in there.
Oh
There are
yeah.
definitely some giants in there. But you're gonna have really high number of days when you're catching fish that size. Like Blayney and I had a day last summer it was like July probably. We probably each put 100 fish in the boat. It was just
Goodness.
ridiculous, lights out. But like I said, most of those fish are like 6 inches to 8 inches, so they're not huge. But I love taking beginner fly fishermen or women out, or just people that are like learning how to cast even still, because you can just go give them a little woolly booger and just whip it around right in front of them, and they're almost definitely going to catch a fish, and that's a great experience for them. So
Those little fish prepare us for the big fish, and I tell people that every single day when somebody says, "Oh, it's another little one." Yeah, but you're going to appreciate this little one because you're struggling with it, and you're going to really struggle with a big one if you don't, catch some more of these little ones. And over time, throughout the day, they start getting it. Okay, this is kind of like I've caught these 10 inchers. I've caught five of them. I'm ready for a big one. You might catch another 10 inchers, and then the next one may be 20 inches, and you're all of a sudden doing a whole lot of things right. So those little ones do prepare us, and smallmouth are the same way as trout, definitely. So
absolutely.
yeah. So Blayney, how about you? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, that's definitely around the size we see. I mean, on some of those floats, me and Nate have seen some, absolute tanks, floating around in there, and you'll see them at the bottom. Obviously, always harder to catch the big fish, but you're exactly right. If you catch, 10, 8-inch smallmouth, you're going to know where they're holding. You're going to know, where you want your fly to be. know how to set the hook. You're gonna know when one's on. So it really does prepare you for that bigger fish. You're gonna, like everything, you kind of have to work your way up. So that's kind of exactly the way I see it too.
That's an interesting fact that I have never voiced is you kind of get the idea of what type of water you're looking for, what the bottom might look like in certain areas if you're
Hmm.
looking for. So moving off the new, what about going up and catching some in the wading? Are there some wading creeks over there that y'all do for smallmouth, or is it mostly just the new?
For the most part, it's the new, and we do wade fish the new as well.
Okay. Oh, okay.
There's
Okay.
a lot of just kind of it's a pretty interesting river. I'd say on the whole, it's pretty a shallow river, shallower than most rivers that size that I've spent time on. But just like any river, once you figure out where those deep holes are, and you can start figuring out the water around those, that's where you're going to find a lot of the fish. Um, Something that's kind of interesting that we've started to notice, I guess, over the last couple of years is, um, and it, I don't know what it is. For the most part, it's we've started to find like few and far between, but a handful of largemouth that are working their way up into the more trout sections of streams and
Oh.
tributaries to the new.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if they're up there like looking. They're much bigger though. I would say, we get a couple, two, three, maybe even a 4 pound largemouth hiding out under a log in a hole that I would 9 times out of 10 only think is there I'm trout fishing in. Um, so
Hmm.
for that, I don't know what they're doing up there. I kind of think they're up there like looking for stockfish, or maybe they're chasing like little chubs and stuff up there. But outside of the New River, like New River is definitely our primary bass fishery, but for whatever reason, and ironically, I've never caught a largemouth in the New River either. But I've caught, probably less than a dozen in my couple of years being up here, but all of them have come out of streams I was trout fishing in. Suddenly,
Huh.
there's just largemouth sitting in the bottom of one of
Huh.
the holes.
Okay.
Strange,
That is a little strange. I wasn't ready for that one.
but it's exciting. Yeah, it's exciting.
Oh, huh. Okay. Well, so we've got some pretty good. I think folks would have some pretty good ammo to come up there and at least start poking around a little bit and have some idea of how to fish, how and kind of where to fish for the wild trout, how and kind of fish for the stock, where to fish for the stock trout, how and where to fish for some of the smallmouth. Definitely you would want to do some more investigation on your own before you go over there, or just look up Ashe Anglers and book a trip. I like to book a trip before I fish on my own. That's what I like to do personally if I can, if I can find a guide and get out there and let them know that hey, I'm going to come back and fish some areas that you're going to fish today. So if you don't want me coming back here, either A, don't show me, or B, just say, hey, I'm going to have somebody here tomorrow to fish. So, and I'll stay out of the way. I don't mind doing that. But a lot of folks are like me in the case that they research, quote unquote research, get on the internet, Google. That's most of our research that we do. But one thing that I found that is very tough to figure out in a new area. You can research it all day long online and come up with a whole bunch of wrong answers. But Blayney, where's a good place to eat over there?
Ooh, good place to eat. I will say if you're in the Boone area, I think you'd be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't stop at Boone Shine. It's got some good food there, some award-winning beers. And you'll find that a lot actually in the West North Carolina region. In the last 10 years or so, a lot of great breweries popping up. As more and more people, move to the area, people like me and Nate, there's certainly a lot of good places to eat opening up in downtown Boone. You have a lot of good, Southern style food, which is amazing. A lot of good restaurants that aren't chains or just local to the area. If you're ever in downtown Boone, you definitely have to stop at the local is a good spot too. A couple of spots, south of Boone over yonder is a good kind of home style food. in a quaint dining area. So Nate's more closer to West Jefferson, but Boone's really kind of my side of town, so I can certainly speak for that.
All right, Nate, how about it? Good places to
If
eat.
you're in West Jefferson, I'd say Boondocks Brewing is a great place to grab a burger and a beer. Or if you're looking for more high end, we've got Craft Bistro, which is excellent food. It's a little on the pricey side, but it's worth it for sure.
What about gas station food? Do y'all have any gas station places over there that have good gas station food?
We've got a taco truck.
Ooh.
It's pretty
You have a
good.
taco truck?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, let's talk about that just a minute. Where's that one?
Yeah, that's like kind of between West Jefferson and Boone. On your way out of town, as you're heading towards West Jefferson from Boone. On the right, it's in the gas station parking lot. I don't even know the name. Blayney lives just down the street from it though.
I
Yeah, I
don't know
don't.
the
I
name
know the
of
truck, but I don't know the name. Yeah,
The
I
big
don't know
red
the name
truck, you
of
can't
any of
miss it.
them.
It's right on the side of the
Is it
highway.
really?
Yeah,
Okay. What road is that on? Because I know somebody's driving around out there looking for a taco. I mean, who wouldn't want a taco out of a taco truck? What road
Highway
is it on?
421.
420. Oh, 421.
yep,
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
mhm.
Going
Right on
toward
the side.
going you said toward West Jefferson from Boone.
Yep. So
I
you're
guess
gonna
going
be
both ways.
going. I guess it'd be eastbound out of Boone, right on the edge of town,
Okay. And it's on the
on the
left or
right.
right side? Right side. Okay.
Right side, big red truck. It's worth a stop.
Cannot miss it then.
Yeah, fire
So
engine red.
there are a lot of breweries over there too, it sounds like. And there's some
yeah,
here,
yeah.
but it
In
sounds like there's a lot for the area.
Yeah, in Boone, there's let's see, there's Boonshine, Appalachian Mountain Brewery, Lost Providence Brewing is good as well, and then there's a new brewery that has opened up on King Street in Boone. I think it's called South End Brewing. So there's definitely a lot. I'd say um, not to pick and choose, but the best beer and the best selection I'd say is at Boonshine. They've been there the longest, I believe. Boonshine and Appalachian Mountain Brewing, but you really can't go wrong. A lot of good craft beer. Places where there's different types of beer for everybody, depending on if you like lagers, pilsners, even seltzers. Hate to say it, but we've got everything.
Do they all have food too?
Um, I'd say I think Lost Province and Boonshine have I guess the most food options. I think Appalachian Mountain Brewery they have like a pizza truck there, but I think it's
Yeah.
only operating in the evening, I think. So a little less selection. But yeah, you'd be surprised. The food's good at all of them.
Good, good. And Nate, how about up around your area? Are the breweries up there? Are they kind of the same or?
Yeah, we've got two little breweries in West Jefferson. We've got New River Brewing, which is great beers, and Boondocks Brewing. And both do great food. Boondocks is more like burgers, sandwiches, stuff like that, and New River does more barbecue stuff. So
Mm, okay.
um, both great options though, and both have great beer. So
Cannot go wrong on any of that information for sure.
yeah,
Every time I do one of these and ask this question, I'm like, all right, I need to go here. Oh yeah, I need to fish, but I need to go here and here and what were they saying about smallmouth? Oh, I remember they were talking about boondocks. Yeah, that's what it was. So anyway.
yeah.
uh so now let's get back on the fishing track just a minute. So let's start. Yeah, I'm gonna start with Nate on this one. And I want to hear about the one that got away, that the one that makes you go back and go, man, I've got to fish this spot again in this whole area again, just in case that fish is around. I want to hear about the one that got away.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a few, more than a few that have gotten away. Um, but I've got a good one for this. So one thing I love to do whenever I'm scouting new water, I'll probably get some flack for this, but it's okay. But I'm a fan of walking up new water with an ultralight spinning rod just to search for new holes and cover a ton of water basically. And
Yeah.
I'm not even really trying to catch fish as much as I'm just trying to see fish and find new spots. So it was last fall that I was walking up a new creek, not one that they stock, but I'm like it's big enough to have some wild fish, some wild trout in it. and I'm walking up it and catching a few here and there along the way. And I come up to this one, just, it's the perfect trout hole, like big cut bank and just a huge boulder right in the back of it that's, undercut 3 or 4 feet. And there's a log down in front of it. It's got all the right structure for, a big, big brown trout hole. And I fish just like little tiny rapalas and stuff when I'm searching new water like that. So I threw the Rapala up in there and just start twitching it out. And it's to this day the biggest wild fish I've seen in any of the streams up here. I didn't catch it, of course, otherwise it wouldn't not be the one that got away. But he followed that Rapala out. He never ate it, but he followed it like all the way to my feet. Basically, I'm wading in the water, like just right on the edge of shore.
Wow.
And he just is like, his nose is on it, but he never eats it. And I'm like pulling it up into the rocks, the Rapala, just to try and give it another inch or something for him to maybe lunge at it. And he's like almost like back out of the water, sitting on this gravel bar, like watching this thing, but he never ate it. And I came back the next day with my fly rod, fished it, a dozen more times looking for him, never saw him again. But I got a good look at him. He's probably low 20-inch fish, which for a wild fish up here is giant.
Yeah. Yeah, that is. I've got some friends that fish up high for wild trout, and they say, I haven't done it with them, but they say they'll take the hooks off of stuff like a Rapala or something and just throw it and just keep throwing it and mark those fish and then come back and fish them with a fly rod. I don't know if they're taking the hooks off or not. Knowing these guys, they probably are just for the sport of it, but you never know. But
I'll switch the hooks out on them a lot too, because I don't like throwing. You hurt the fish with a treble for sure.
Yeah,
I'll switch them out for just single barbless hooks sometimes.
Yeah.
And just put one on, because I do like catching them. Yeah, admittedly, with the spin rod, but for the most part, I'm with the fly. But just sort of, I just use it as an exploring tool. If I'm just trying to find new water and something easy to keep in the back of the car.
Yeah, something to keep in mind and on the next time you come down. And it's not always about getting that 20+ inch wild brown, although that's a great thing. It's just understanding what's going on. It's just a fact finding mission a lot of times.
Exactly.
Yeah. Blayney, how about you?
Yeah, there's certainly one that comes to mind, actually, not too far away from where I'm at in Boone, about 30 minutes south, on a big delayed harvest section of a river. I was walking up, I saw a big run. It was I think early fall, Septemberish, so the water was a little bit low, and where I thought I'd find a lot of fish, that run was pretty shallow. So I was like, you know what, there's a big eddy there. I bet if I switch up my presentation here, do a little fly change, I could, keep a fly there and kind of bounce it around. So what I decided to do was, I just took a little, miniature white little Euro bugger, about a size 8 that sinks really quickly. Put that and had an indicator about 4 or 5 feet above that fly, just so I could sink it in the eddy. I could just keep it there, and I casted, fly lands, indicator settles down. I give it 1, maybe 2 pops, and indicator just plunges down. All of a sudden, I got, I think, must have been about a 22 inch. I think it was a stock brown trout on there, but he just basically ripped the rod right out of my hands, and of course, ended up losing him. But it's a testament that the state definitely stocks some big fish. And those delayed harvest waters, definitely don't overlook those, because there's a lot of good ones in there. But yeah, that's certainly the one that got away from me. But it's every fish that you have, that gets off the line is a learning lesson. So that was definitely a little mental note where I was like, you know what, maybe I should try that every once in a while. Hitting that slower water when things are a little bit shallow, that might be the perfect little spot for a big fish that could just be cruising or just waiting for a big meal to pop up. So yeah, that's my story there.
I think we learn more from the ones that got away than the ones we catch. Just listening to you talk about, both of you, just listening to you both talk about the ones that got away, you kind of remember a whole lot. Like the back was out of the water, it about pulled the rod out of my hand, and it was, just things to remember of how many times would you pass by that rock, Nate, and not fish that whole run? Never. You would never walk by it without fishing it.
Definitely not after seeing them.
Yeah, right. And Blayney, same with you. You never walk by that spot and not fish it.
Yeah,
Um,
still see it in my sleep sometimes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. A friend of mine, I took him fishing at the Watauga one time, and he had a bigger fish get off, and that was the first place we went to where we came back the next year. I said, well, where you want to fish? I'll tell you where I want to fish. I want to fish right there. I was like, where you lost that big fish? Okay. I'll go up there with you. You know, it's just, and he cannot not fish that place, usually first and last at least. If not, hey, let me jump out here and fish this place when we go by because it's pretty easy access. It's not real easy, but it's fairly easy. So yeah, I like hearing the ones that got away because I learned some things about it, and it brings out the emotion, and it's which is really cool. So what do y'all say we close this thing out?
Sounds good.
All right,
Sounds good, David.
our first guest fishes and guides Western North Carolina. He's an owner at Ashe Anglers. Nate, really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much, David. That was a blast.
Yeah, it's a quick hour or so, that's for sure. Second guest also fishes and guides Western North Carolina. He's also an owner at Ashe Anglers. Blayney, thank you for stopping by and joining us. It's nice to meet you today.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well, and been a pleasure.
Yeah.
I'll fill an hour talking about fishing anytime.
You just listened to Nate and Blayney fishing Western North Carolina with Ashe Anglers on Southeastern Fly. See you next time.